Genesis 6, one of the strangest passages in all of Scripture. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Genesis 6 verses 1-4. Who were the sons of God? Angels? Kings? Judges? Who were the Nephilim? Giants? Warriors? Fallen hybrids? Why did this union provoke such wrath that God sent a flood to cleanse the earth? This mystery has ignited debates for centuries. Some dismiss it as myth. Others see it as a key to understanding not only the flood, but the story of evil itself. But one thing is certain. Genesis 6 is not just a footnote. It is a turning point, the prelude to judgment, the stage for Noah's Ark, the shadow before the flood. To understand, we must peel back the layers of scripture, history, and prophecy. We must go where the text points, however uncomfortable it makes us. 1. Before the flood, a world corrupted. The world before flood was not like ours. Humanity multiplied, built cities, forged tools. But violence filled the earth, and wickedness spread like a plague. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 6 verse 5. What caused such corruption? Genesis links it directly to the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. This was no ordinary marriage. It was a rebellion that blurred the line between heaven and earth. 2. Who were the sons of God? The phrase B'nai Elohim appears elsewhere in the Old Testament, always referring to heavenly beings. In Job 1 verse 6, the sons of God present themselves before the Lord, and Satan comes among them. In Job 38 verse 7, the sons of God shout for joy when God lays earth's foundation. This strongly suggests Genesis 6 is speaking of angels, not loyal angels, but rebels. Ancient Jewish tradition, echoed in the book of Enoch, agrees. Angels abandoned their place, took human women, and produced unnatural offspring. The New Testament seems to support this view. The angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. He is kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Jude 6. God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness, to be kept until the judgment. Tvul Peter Tvul Fira. The sons of God were angels who rebelled, not only spiritually but physically, crossing boundaries God had set. 3. Who were the Nephilim? Their offspring were Nephilim, a Hebrew word often translated giants. They were described as mighty men, men of renown, warriors who filled the earth with violence. Legends may echo their memory. Tales of demigods, half-divine heroes, and monstrous kings. Numbers 13:33 records the spies saying, "There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." Whether exaggeration or reality, the reputation was terrifying. The Nephilim symbolized corruption of flesh, society, and covenant. For why was God's wrath so severe? If Genesis 6 describes angels rebelling and producing hybrids, it explains the urgency of the flood. The human line through which the Messiah would come was being corrupted. Violence was spreading. Covenant order was collapsing. God's solution, judgment. So the Lord said, "I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, for I am sorry that I have made them." Genesis 6 verse 7. Yet amid this, one man found grace, Noah. His line was preserved, not only to save humanity, but to protect the promise of redemption. 5. Ancient echoes of the Nephilim. The story of beings who cross divine boundaries appears in cultures worldwide. Greek myths speak of gods mating with mortals, producing demigods. Mesopotamian tales recall divine kings and hybrid creatures. Native legends tell of giants who roamed the earth. Are these echoes of Genesis 6? Fragment of primeval memory? The Bible gives the inspired version. Not gods, but angels. Not glory, but rebellion. Not salvation, but corruption. Where did they go? The flood cleansed the earth. The Nephilim perished in judgment. Yet after the flood, their name appears again. Numbers 13 speaks of Nephilim in Canaan. Deuteronomy recalls giants like Og Bashan. How could this be? Were these new offspring survivors? Or is the term used symbolically for terrifying warriors? The mystery deepens. The giants may have died in the flood, but their shadow lingers in Scripture, and their rebellion points forward to something greater, the final rebellion at the end of days. Genesis 6 is not just about the past. It is about a pattern. When heaven's rebels intrude, when mankind embraces corruption, when violence fills the earth, God acts. The question is, will we listen before the next judgment comes? The flood had come and gone. The waters receded. The ark rested on Ararat. Humanity began again. But the shadow of the Nephilim was not erased. Centuries later, when Israel's spies entered Canaan, they trembled. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed them. Numbers 13:33. The giants had returned, or had they never truly left? The question haunts history. How can Nephilim appear again after flood? Were these remnants, new offspring, or simply warriors so great that the Israelites used the dreaded name of old? One thing is certain. Israel's conquest of the Promised Land was also a war against the descendants of giants. Giants after the flood. Scripture lists several giant clans in Canaan. Anakim, tall like cedars, descendants of Anak, feared by the spies. Rephaim, ancient giants whose remnants lived in Bashan. Emim and Zamzummim, peoples described as mighty and numerous, destroyed before Israel arrived. Og of Bashan, a king so enormous his bed was over 13 feet long, Deuteronomy 3 verse 11. These names are not throwaway details. They represent a continuation of the Genesis 6 theme. Humanity corrupted, boundaries blurred, fear spread. 2. The fear of the spies. When Moses sent 12 spies into Canaan, 10 returned terrified. The land devours its inhabitants. All the people we saw in it are of great height. Numbers 13:32. The giant became an excuse for unbelief. Only Joshua and Caleb declared, "The Lord is with us. Do not fear them." Israel chose fear, not faith. Their punishment, 40 years in the wilderness until a new generation would rise. The giants exposed not only physical danger, but spiritual compromise. They reveal whether Israel would trust in God or tremble before flesh. 3. Og of Bashan, the last of the Rephaim. One of Israel's most terrifying foes was Og, king of Bashan. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth. Deuteronomy 3 verse 11. 9 cubits long, over 13 feet. 4 cubits wide, nearly 6 feet. A bed fit for a giant. Og ruled over 60 fortified cities. To Israel, still desert wanderers, he seemed unstoppable. But God declared, "Do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand." Deuteronomy 3 verse 2. Israel struck Og down, destroying his people and cities. The last of the Rephaim fell. This was more than victory. It was cleansing. The shadow of the Nephilim was being erased from the land. For Goliath, the champion of Gath. Generations later, another giant rose, Goliath of Gath. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. 1 Samuel 17 verse 4. 6 cubits in a span, over 9 feet tall, clad in bronze armor, spear like a weaver's beam, shield bearer before him. He taunted Israel 40 days. Saul and his army cowered. Then came a shepherd boy with a sling. David declared, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." 1 Samuel 17 verse 45. The stone flew. The giant fell. David's victory over Goliath symbolized more than military skill. It was covenant triumph over the shadow of Nephilim, faith over fear, God's power over human might. 5. Why giants mattered. Israel's wars against giants were not random battles. They were spiritual warfare made flesh. The giants represented opposition to God's promise. They stood in the very land God promised Abraham. Fear over faith. Israel's test was always whether to trust God or cower before giants. The corruption of nations. These peoples represented cultures steeped in idolatry, sorcery, and rebellion. By striking them down, God was not only clearing land, he was preserving covenant. 6. Echoes in prophecy. The shadow of giants stretches beyond Canaan. Jesus warns in Matthew 24, verse 37, "As were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." The days of Noah were marked by corruption, violence, and the Nephilim. Could the final days echo the same rebellion? The book of Revelation describes demonic powers unleashed, crossing boundaries again between heaven and earth. The spirit of the Nephilim, the rebellion of angels, the corruption of humanity, reappears at the end of history. The giants within. The giants of the Bible were real, formidable, and terrifying, but their deeper meaning is spiritual. We may not face Anakim in Canaan or Goliath in a valley, but we face giants of pride, addiction, fear, corruption, and idolatry. Like Israel, we must choose fear or faith. The question remains, will we fall before giants or rise in God's strength? The giants may have fallen in battle, but their shadow remains. Their story points forward to the final rebellion, the ultimate clash between heaven and earth. The Nephilim are gone, but their spirit is not. The Nephilim were drowned in the flood. The Anakim and Rephaim fell before Joshua. Goliath was struck down by David, but their shadow never vanished. The Bible warns of the rebellion of Genesis 6, the intrusion of heaven's rebels, the corruption of flesh, the spread of violence, was not only ancient history, it is a pattern, a prophecy, a preview of the end. Jesus himself said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so will it be at the coming of the Son of Man." Matthew 24, verse 37. The days of Noah were marked by Nephilim. The last days will echo them, the angels who rebelled. The New Testament pulls back the curtain on Genesis 6. The angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling. He is kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Jude 6. God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness. 2 Peter 2:4. These passages describe angels who cross boundaries, leaving heaven's order, intruding into earth's corruption, bound, chained, reserved for judgment. Yet Revelation warns of demonic forces unleashed in the end times, echoing the rebellion of old. The spirit of Nephilim returns, not in fleshly giants, but in global deception, corruption, and violence. The spirit of the giants. The Nephilim embodied three things: boundary-breaking rebellion, angels abandoned their realm, corruption of flesh, humanity blurred with unnatural offspring, violence filling the earth, power without righteousness, strength without mercy. Do these patterns sound familiar? Today, technology experiments with altering DNA, blending species, rewriting creation. Violence spreads across nations. Pride pushes against every divine boundary. The Nephilim spirit lives on. End-time parallels. Revelation describes demonic locusts, beasts from the sea, a dragon waging war, nations uniting in rebellion, humanity worshiping idols of power, technology, and self. The same deception that birthed Nephilim resurfaces, the rejection of God's order, the worship of strength and renown, the corruption of creation itself. Paul warned, the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders. 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 9. As in Noah's day, humanity will again embrace corruption, and judgment will again fall. Christ, the final giant slayer. From Noah to Joshua to David, God's people faced giants. Each victory foreshadowed a greater one. David struck down Goliath with a stone, but Christ struck down sin and death with a cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. Colossians 2 verse 15. At the cross, the greatest giant, Satan himself, was defeated. At the resurrection, The grave was broken. At his return, every rebellion will be crushed. The Nephilim were mighty men of old, but Christ is the mighty God eternal. Our giants today, we no longer fight flesh and blood giants. But Paul reminds us, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness. Ephesians 6 verse 12. Our giant are spiritual: addiction, pride, lust, fear, corruption, injustice. The same spirit that drove Nephilim drives the temptations we face. The question is the same: will we tremble or trust the Lord of hosts? Lessons from the Nephilim: sin always escalates. The rebellion of angels became corruption of humanity, which became violence filling the earth. God's judgment is sure. The flood came. The giants fell. The end will come. Christ is greater. No matter the size of the giant, the power of the cross is stronger. Faith over fear. Joshua, Caleb, and David teach us, giants fall when God fights for us. The Nephilim story is not just about giants. It is about a God who will not tolerate rebellion forever, but who always provides a way of salvation. In Noah's day, it was the ark. In David's day, it was a covenant. In our day, it is Christ. The Nephilim may be gone, but the spirit of rebellion remains. The final judgment is coming. The only refuge is Jesus Christ. When angels rebelled, giants fell. When Christ returns, every rebellion will end. The question is not about them. It is about us. When the final giant rises, whose side will you be on? The Nephilim may be gone, but the God who conquers giants is not.